Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back. What is going on? This has already been an excellent official first day of Dare to Be Great 5. And the next session we have here is a silver sponsored session. And we thank you so very much for being a silver sponsor. Next person here is going to be Shannon Polito, and she is the founder of Help for the Headset and is going to be doing this next session here. My friend, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be here and a part of this whole thing. I think it is fantastic that we have so many people from this is amazing. Today, I'm going to talk about the idea of undoing the damage of the compartmentalization culture. This is something that I've started to get, well, not started, I've been extremely passionate about. So for me, with Help for the Headset, I've been a dispatcher for 15 years, and I started to get extremely involved in the wellness aspect of our dispatchers where I work, and it just kind of took on its own life where I still love the job that I do. I love being a 911 dispatcher, but for me, it is about actually trying to take care of the people who are doing the job. That's where I've gotten extremely passionate about that. And I think it's incredibly important to try and undo a lot of first responder culture ideas that we have just perpetuated for decades, since it's been around, essentially. I mean, look at what we're still trying to fight for, dispatchers being first responders in general. So we still are fighting for a lot of these things for a big culture shift. So I know in law enforcement and fire, both tend to be they're leading in terms of trying to actually shift the culture, shift the wellness mindset, that whole thing. And there's still playing catch up from decades of suck it up and just and you're not good at your job if you're affected by it. So I know that dispatch is also trying to catch up as well, but we're still lagging simply because we're just finally starting to get acknowledged. So that's where I'm coming from with this, is coming through and doing all the research on trauma, on stress, injury, all that kind of thing. And this is where it lands, is where we all kind of get trained and started in compartmentalizing. So I'm going to dive in. Please, if you have questions, let me know. I'm monitoring the chat as well. Or I'm going to ask a few questions, so I will be looking to you to provide your feedback, your experiences. But I really like this quote from Brene Brown, where when we numb the dark, we numb the light. And that I think is one of the key things where we struggle a lot with the compartmentalization idea. So we don't get anywhere until we actually start with the foundation of our stress response. That is where all of our stress injuries, that is where the trauma injuries actually come from, is our actual body and brain's response to stress. So I'm going to hit the foundation of that because I'm going to jam through it. There's a lot that you could go into with it, but to start there, because this is what actually lays the foundation for everything that we go through. So what stress does to our bodies, minds, and emotions. So there's acute stress. This is your fight or flight. Most people are aware of the actual fight or flight phrase. And it's kind of like, yeah, of course I know fight or flight. Yeah, adrenaline, got it. And then they move on. But what does it actually do to our bodies? So when you are in acute stress, the idea is that the threat can be real or imagined. It's a perception of threat that triggers a stress response. So my perception of threat is completely different than your perception of threat. For those of you who've been doing the job a while, remember when getting a stolen vehicle was a threat to you, and you get the adrenaline dump and everything would clench up. You're like, oh God, a stolen car. Now, those of us that have been doing the job for a while, you get a stolen car hit and the response is, here we go. That's our response. So it's no longer a threat to us. Our brains read threats completely differently. So for those who just have calls dropped in your ear, that is considered a threat response because your brain doesn't know what's coming. So somebody screaming in your ear tends to trigger your brain, whether you've heard screaming in your ear a million times before for 25 years, it doesn't matter. Your brain reads it as a threat. So then your body responds. There's no separation between brain and body. So when your brain says threat, triggers fight or flight, and off your body goes. So you dump a bunch of adrenaline in there. You dump the stress hormone cortisol, and adrenaline can fade. It'll just kind of pass its way through. Cortisol, however, only goes away if you get a full night's sleep or vigorous exercise. And I'm sure we are all doing both of those regularly, right? Sure. So then cortisol actually sits in your body and creates its own problems. And we'll talk about that with chronic stress. You get shaky, your heart pumps faster, your hands actually literally shake as the blood gets drawn from your extremities to your core. That's why you feel like you have to use the restroom when you have a stress response, because your body's like, I gotta get rid of anything I don't need. So that happens literally every single time your brain reads a threat. So that is every time your officers or your whoever's in your field scream for code 3 fill, when they don't answer a status check when they're on a car stop, when your firefighters yell that part of the roof's collapsing, when your paramedics scream that they need PD, whatever it is, if it's CPR, all of these things, that is your day. Every single day, over and over again, you're having this acute stress response over and over again, which then goes to chronic stress. So the chronic stress is essentially acute stress all the time with no perceptible end. So you are feeling constantly overwhelmed and constantly pressured. So this is the kind of stress that significantly wears down a person's health. The exposure to stress hormones actually creates a whole bunch of different health issues linked to this. It creates anxiety, depression, heart disease. So it creates weight gain because our liver actually dumps sugar into our bodies every single time that we have an acute stress response. And if we don't burn it, so the idea is that we're ready to fight or we're ready to flight. And if we're not burning this sugar because we're not running away and we're not fighting anybody, what are we doing in dispatch? Sitting in our chair, then our body reabsorbs the sugar and just takes it as sugar. So, and with no enjoyment. So we are reabsorbing sugar without getting to enjoy eating the cookie or donut or whatever it is that creates that sweet, that sweet sensation. We're just gaining weight from our acute chronic stress. Creates strokes, sleep and memory and concentration issues are huge amongst first responders, is having struggling with sleep and memory. Yes, I was going to say, I do see somebody saying that they twitch their legs. Yeah, I bounce my legs all the time too. So that's how you can kind of burn it out a little bit. But the idea is that your body starts to actually become altered based on these responses. Very rarely is your trauma doesn't necessarily come from the event. It comes from how your body and brain respond to the event. And that is these stress responses. That's what stacks up the stress injury. So the idea too is your immune system. Your body says, I'm trying to fight for my life. Why am I going to fight a cold? So it turns off your immune system. And it doesn't turn it back on because you got a day or two of relaxation. It's not like, oh, thank God, now I finally know how to fight disease again. It doesn't know what to do anymore. So that's why first responders have chronic long-term illnesses. They have autoimmune disease issues because our immune systems literally don't know how to work because we keep turning it off because we're in constant chronic acute stress. The same goes for women, first responders, women as first responders for their fertility. Their reproductive system gets turned off because, again, the brain's like, if we're trying to fight for our life, why am I trying to make a baby? So it turns off that system, and a lot of first responders have fertility issues because the body doesn't know how to turn it all back on. So that is your acute and your chronic stress foundation for what we're already doing. This does not include what you're actually doing as your job, what calls you take, anything that happens on the radio, the actual underlying issues with family, with schedules. This doesn't include any of it. This is just your body and brain's response to the things that happen to you every single day, 8 hours, 10. I know some people are out there working 16 to 18 hours. And then how many days a week do you work? 3, 5, 16 days in a row. I think I was in a class with somebody who'd worked 47 days in a row. Their body and brain was born up at that point. This leads to our hypervigilance cycle. So if you have never read Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement or First Responders by Dr. Gil Martin, please do. It's incredibly helpful, especially if you were also married or dating a first responder. It's very insightful and into both of you, basically. But the hypervigilance cycle, so this is extremely normal for us as first responders to go through. But that normal range of risk, those are for people who are going through their job is I'm not to belittle a barista, but a barista. They have a normal range of risk. Their hypervigilance has to be not making someone's drink wrong versus someone's going to die if they make someone's drink wrong. And I'm sure there are plenty of customers that make them feel like that, but that's not actually accurate, right? So as dispatchers, when we are at the top of our hypervigilance, when we're on duty, we feel alive, we're alert, we're energetic, we are on it, we are involved in every part of the process. And damn if we're not humorous. Not for public consumption humorous, but we're hilarious. We have jokes on jokes when we're at work. And we're just literally like everything is trucking, like we're just going on. We feel competent. We feel good at what we do when we're at the top of our hypervigilance cycle. Our brains and bodies cannot sustain hypervigilance constantly. And what is it that creates the hypervigilance? We don't know what's coming, right? Is the call I'm going to get dropped in my ear or answer someone screaming and they're literally going to die on the phone with me? Or is it going to be somebody who's calling about his neighbor's garbage can being 3 inches in his driveway? You don't know. You have these peaks and these crazy valleys. You have nothing going on for 5.5 hours, and then all of a sudden it pops off and you feel like you will never get through everything that needs to get done. And then an hour later, you're bored again. That's our hypervigilance cycle. And people do not understand this. So I was told by an old director of ours that you're not paid for what you do 85% of the time. You're paid for the 15% where you cannot predict it. And that's the problem. Are you sitting at the channel and you're just doing status checks, and then all of a sudden someone is screaming into your radio, code 3, fill, foot bail. They didn't even put themselves out on a person stop at that point, right? So you have no idea. A regular car stop turns into a shooting. Who knows? That's our peak hypervigilance. We can't do that every single day, all the time. So when we go home, we drop to the bottom of our hypervigilance cycle. We are exhausted. We are detached. We want to isolate. We don't want to talk to anybody, and we are apathetic. We don't care. I don't care where we're eating, what we're going to do on the weekend. All of what I would consider in the moment, piddly little petty problems do not concern me, because I cannot handle them, because my body and brain are so wiped that this is all I can do is barely exist. That's a pretty crappy feeling. That is where we are basically on the edge of feeling depressed whenever we're at home. And if you feel that crappy, where do we go back to feeling good? We go back to work. Yes, there is mandatory overtime for a lot of us, but a lot of people choose to go back to work or don't mind going back to work because that's where they feel good again. They feel alive. They're energetic. They're in it. They feel competent. When they're at home, they feel guilty for the things that they aren't doing, guilty for the things that they are doing, judged for the fact that they don't want to do anything, and then not wanting to talk to people that they're not forced to talk to. So we crash down to that hypervigilance cycle. So the idea is to try and figure out how to get back into that normal range of risk. And there are ways of doing that. We're going to talk a little bit about one specific way, one specific area that we get affected by for the hypervigilance. But this is a normal first responder cycle, and it is extremely difficult. So when we are on the bottom of our hypervigilance cycle, pulling ourselves out of it takes a lot of work. And that's the thing that we don't want to do, is put out any effort at that point. So what is compartmentalization? So the idea is compartmentalization is literally a survival mechanism. It is what our brains do to protect us. As first responders, it's a little bit, so it's varied for first responders in general. So for police officers, their compartmentalization is they get on scene. Let's go extreme. On scene of an active shooter. They get on scene, they see dead people, they see hurt people, they see blood, they hear gunshots. So their brain has to literally stop their processing, compartmentalize everything they're feeling and thinking at that moment, shove it aside because now they have to switch into tactical approach, go take out and neutralize the threat. They cannot possibly process the fact that they are looking at people's family members dead on the ground. They have to keep moving. They have to keep pushing through to deal with something. Less extreme. So a domestic violence situation, you have kids crying and screaming. You have somebody who's clearly been beaten up. You have a suspect still in the house. You have to process so much. Your brain cannot go, this is very sad. I don't like this. I'm angry about this. Same with firefighters and paramedics when they get on scene. It is all about that person in front of them and what they have to do. They have to get very robotic about it. Like, what, this person is a machine. What part of the machine is broken and how do I address it? It's different for dispatchers. And I'm going to say, I am all about us being first responders. It is just a separate situation. So we are not on scene having to process these things. So it's a little bit different in terms of what our brain is actually trying to protect us from. We get stuck in this idea that we can't do our job if we feel something about the calls that we're taking, which is not true. We can actually take calls, feel sad about the call, feel angry at the injustice of the call, feel scared for the person, and still continue to move through the call. So the idea is that dispatchers, we actually can start to shift the culture idea that in order to do our jobs well, we cannot feel anything, which very, very untrue. Unless you're a robot or a sociopath, then you're gonna feel things because you're a human being. So the idea is, how are we going to feel these things appropriately, and how are we going to handle them and process them appropriately? Instead of just this constant shove it down. Like, it's this constant thing of like, you feel sad, shove it down. You feel angry, shove it down. That's terrible. That is what is doing so much damage to our brains and our bodies. So the idea of is the compartmentalization, the reason for the picture is that it's like a hallway essentially. So if you visualize the hallway full of doors leads to many different rooms. When compartmentalizing, we basically put this pain or situation that we don't want to deal with and shut the door, and then sometimes we lock it. And so what we want to do is stop locking things away in these rooms. So why can it be so dangerous? Why do we even care? Why are we even trying focusing on it? So by disconnecting from what we're feeling, it can and does create a ton of different issues. So relational connection issues is a significant one. I know as dispatchers, we hate people. We don't want to talk to them. We don't want to connect to them. All of those things, I get it. So what the idea is, though, is as human beings, we need it. We need social connection. This is something that has been proven scientifically over and over and over again. COVID taught us how important social connection really, really is, because people didn't have it. And the levels of depression and suicide skyrocketed because people need connection. So if you are compartmentalizing, so kind of like Brene Brown's quote, if you're compartmentalizing all the darkness, then you're also compartmentalizing all the good, all the joy, all the happy. It is almost impossible to be in a relationship with another human being if you are taking all of your feelings and putting them in a little box and packing it away until one day they all explode, essentially, which is what will happen if you continue to constantly pack them away. So if you have somebody that you are trying to connect with, and this doesn't have to be spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, it could be family members, your best friend, whoever it is that you connect with the most, you will never truly develop a deep connection with somebody if you have to hide huge parts of yourself by packing them away. So compartmentalizing, chronic compartmentalizing, let me specify that. So chronic compartmentalizing is going to keep you from making any true relational connections because it's not all of you connecting to all of them. It is whatever part of you that you've allowed to connect to somebody, and it is not every facet of who you are because you've locked away so many different things inside of you, which it leads to the inability to experience joy, essentially. If you are numbing out because you don't want to feel grief, loss, sadness, anger, unfairness, judgment, shame, guilt, if you don't want to feel any of those things, the counterbalance to them is happiness, contentment, joy. Those things, they cannot be experienced separately. So if you are numbing one, you are numbing all. You can't pop in and out of, I'm so happy, and then I'm numb. Like, that's not, because you just can't tap into it. That's not the way that humans work. That's the science of humans, unfortunately. So there's also becomes physical manifestations in our body. So chronic compartmentalizing, there is no separating how our brains affects our bodies and how our bodies affect our brains. So if you are depressed, you very often have physical symptoms of your depression. You are exhausted, chronic muscle pain, migraines. Conversely, if you have chronic body pain, very often you're affected mentally. You have depression, anxiety because of the pain. So everything is always interconnected. When we chronically compartmentalize, our body starts to tell us, I need help. Somebody help me because I am struggling. So it is in anxiety, it is in muscle pain, joint pain that is unexplained for any other reason. It is chronic intestinal issues that cannot be explained for any other reason. It is migraines, the sense of constantly having a pit or a rock as a pit in your stomach, feeling like your chest is so tight that it's being crushed, that there's a weight on it all the time, that you start to actually have panic attacks when you think about going back to work. When you are on your weekend, however long you get on your weekend, and you start to literally develop anxiety about going back, that's your body telling you something is going on connected to work. When you're at work in the parking lot and it is everything you can do not to cry before you go into work because you have to go into work, that is your body telling you, I need help, something's going on. Okay, so and then there's the mental and emotional manifestations. So everything, again, all connected. So are you starting to experience memory loss about parts of your job or parts of your day? Is your brain literally blocking out parts of it because it's trying to protect you from whatever's going on? Or you've chronically compartmentalized to the point that your brain is so overwhelmed that it can't do certain things anymore. If you've ever looked at brain scans, it is incredibly fascinating, sad, but fascinating, that brains undergoing stress and trauma injuries, if they're chronic, they literally turn off parts of the brain because the brain can't handle it anymore. We see this in a much lower level in terms of decision fatigue. We make so many decisions in a day that we get to a point, especially at the bottom of our hypervigilance cycle, where we literally cannot make a choice. That is our freeze stress response. So they have fight, flight, freeze becomes decision fatigue, where we just hit a point where I cannot make a choice on, am I going to work out today? Am I going to go to the grocery store today? Am I getting out of bed today? Like, literally cannot make a choice because of it. So that freeze response makes it so that we are unable to continue essentially living our life. Whoop. All right, did I just change my whole screen? Sorry about that. By moving it around. Does my screen still look okay, or did I totally mess it all up? We're good?
You're good.
Sorry about that. And yeah, thank you. I was going to say I was moving it and it popped out. Okay, so that is exactly, by the way, I know, Esther, you have made a little, like, that is exactly why we can't decide what's for lunch sometimes. It's truly so just a personal story. So I was very overwhelmed. I do have chronic pain. It was in a terrible day. I had to decide, do I go to work, call out, or go or make a phone call before I do any of these things? I sat in the car staring at one point for 10 minutes because I was frozen in my choice. I could not, all of them were right decisions. None of them were wrong choices. It wasn't like, oh God, this moral dilemma, what should I do? Nope. It was completely that I had completely frozen in my decision. I had to shake myself out of it and say, make a choice. So it is a very, very real thing with decision fatigue and the freeze response. So first responder specific issues. So this is where I'm going to ask you guys some questions. Why do you think we compartmentalize more than the general public? Throw that up there for you guys. Pause and wait for, and you can even throw in the other answers to these questions too. What are the benefits to it? And what are the drawbacks if you have an idea? So mental survival mode, yep. For us as dispatch, yes, I'm gonna say for first responders in general, yep, sometimes we have to. In dispatch, we're gonna talk about a little bit how it's not as, yep, necessary, be able to continue in a stressful situation. Yeah, so you don't hit that freeze response, right? That's why that training is always so important, because we default to muscle memory when our brains are overwhelmed. We literally default. It's incredible how our brains work that way. Level of exposure, yep. Okay, so our benefits are protecting ourselves, being able to continue. So what are the drawbacks in our specific job for complete compartmentalization? Talked a little bit about some of the things that actually, yep, no trauma release. Yes, that's huge. Because we just hold on to it and it literally continues to build and create more and more problems. Yep. All right. We become numb. Yep, to everything good and bad. And that, I know sometimes we forget, again, especially at the bottom of our hypervigilance cycle, we forget there's a lot of good. We talk about in another class the need for connection that I have, and it's literally like we look at the world in the 1% that we deal with all the time. So we think everybody is on probation, everybody's a sex registrant, everybody lies, and nobody pays their car registration. That's the world that we exist in. So that's the world that we think exists. We forget that there's a 99% out there of the world that is actually good and positive, and that people can be good and they have good intentions. So we get stuck in this. We literally compartmentalize the entire world by being in our jobs. So the combination of stress response and compartmentalization leads to injury, because, I mean, Esther kind of nailed it there. There's no trauma release. We literally take our trauma, we stack it, we stack it, we stack it. We're locking it in that hallway full of doors. We're double bolting. We're like, no one's ever going to get out of here. And it literally, the image that comes to mind is it literally starts to leak out like smoke would underneath those doors. And it just starts to come out. And all of a sudden, your whole hallway is going to be completely filled with trauma and stress injury smoke. So what do we do? I'm just going to end the presentation there and be like, all right, guys, good luck. Stop compartmentalizing. No, just kidding. So I will never, a huge thing for me is I've gone to so many sessions that basically they're like, hey, this job's going to kill you. Good luck. And then they send me out on my way. That's not great. I don't like that. So I always want to give very specific tools for what we can do. So number one, we need to pay attention to what we're experiencing. If you haven't been doing this for, I don't know, the 20 years that you've been a dispatcher, this is going to take some work. These are going to be habits that we're going to talk about developing. But we have to pay attention to it. I'm not kidding. when our bodies are telling us what we're experiencing, and we just are so bad at paying attention to it because we tell our bodies, shut up, I don't have time to deal with you today because I have to go back into work, because the kids still need my attention, because my significant other is just like a giant kid. Everybody needs something from me, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at home. Everybody's take, take, take. I don't have time to deal with you, body. Our bodies are going to make us take time to deal with them at some point. So when I say pay attention to what we're experiencing, it's exactly what, with the pay attention to our bodies, they're paired together. So let's say you are taking a call and all of a sudden you feel nauseous during this call, and then you're like, this is kind of weird. I don't feel like this call is especially traumatic. It's your body saying, we've just stacked something else onto it. Again, these do not have to be your classic stereotypical trauma calls. It's just your job sometimes, the cumulative stacking effect of never knowing what's coming into your ear or what's going to happen that day or who's going to not be there. Are you going to be doing the job by yourself today? Are you going to have somebody else in the room with you? Is your supervisor going to pick on every single thing that you do today, or are you going to be left alone? You don't know what is going on in your day. And that level of unpredictability, yes, that's why some of us love this job, is because I don't know what's going to happen today. But to our brains, it's I don't know what's going to happen today. Like that's how it perceives it, even though our personalities may love that. So, am I taking something that is going to bother me? Is my body responding to this? Is my chest getting tight? Am I starting to get a headache? Do I feel a little tingly? Do I feel like I have a pit in my stomach? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel like I have to go to the bathroom? Are my legs bouncing constantly? Am I manifesting my anxiety and stress by literally bouncing and never stopping moving? Those are all things you pay attention to. So then you need to be able to talk to someone you trust. Me coming to you today and saying like, hey, guess what? You guys have been compartmentalizing and it's terrible. Here's your solution, and I walk away after 50 minutes, I'm not changing your life. These are big things. I am just trying to bring you awareness, but you need to have someone that you can talk to that you trust. It does not have to be a traditional therapist. I've been in therapy for 10 years. I'm an advocate. Please do go see a therapist. But if that is not the level that you're at yet in terms of seeking help, I'm also a huge advocate for coaching. But if you're, again, not there, find a supervisor you trust. You don't trust supervisors? Find a coworker you trust, a pastor, a family member. They don't have to understand the job precisely to be able to help you, but it does help if somebody does get the nuances of the job to be able to kind of guide you through this whole thing. But talk to somebody. When I'm at work, I feel like I want to throw up the whole day. When I'm at work, I feel like I want to cry the whole day. Start to talk to somebody. And then the idea is to learn how to reconnect holistically. Holistically just means mind, body, spirit, emotion, like all of it. So how do you actually start paying attention? We have separated ourselves so much, like, oh, nope, it's very theoretical. This is my brain, versus, nope, that's physical. I don't address those two things together. So the idea is to actually learn how to reconnect holistically. So the idea is healthy ways. So another step in terms of, well, how do we do this, are healthy ways to contain rather than compartmentalize. Then I will explain why it is different and how it is different. So what we want to do is first regulate ourselves. So the idea is we have to notice what's going on and regulating ourselves. So as you learn about your feelings, your thoughts, and your body response, you just need to acknowledge it. So if all of a sudden if you have spent 10 years shoving it down, this is going to take practice. This is going to take you paying attention to what's going on with you. So if you start to okay, I'm going to start to figure out how my body's actually responding, how my emotions are responding, and you feel, ooh, that was really big. This is really big. I don't like this. Then the idea is to learn how to regulate. So I know that when I first started, going to therapy, it was because I didn't want to deal with emotions because they were too big for me and I thought I would get stuck in them forever. So I was taught that they're like waves. They come over you, they can be very big, but then they ebb and they go away. So for me, I had to learn, oh, okay, emotions are not all bad. They're not terrible. I need to experience them and they're not going to drown me. They are going to actually crash over me and then move on. So figuring out how to regulate myself through breathing exercises was significant. So breathing is huge. Yes, we do it every day, all the time to stay alive. Got it. However, there's actual breathing exercises that you can do that actually take you out of fight or flight. That's the whole point, is your body has jumped into acute stress so often that it is the default setting for us. We don't want it to be the default setting anymore. So if you are actually able to do, there are so many different, you could literally Google breathing exercises and find 1,000 of them. But the easiest to remember is box breathing, where it's so literally a box. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. So it's literally this constant, every 4 seconds you're changing it and it pulls you out of fight or flight. Grounding exercises are also extremely helpful. That's the thing where you find 5 different colors in the room. Find 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, 1 thing you can taste. Please be careful about that last one. Don't just find something in the room to taste. But the idea is that it's grounding. So it takes you out of literally that fight or flight response, the tunnel vision. And because you have to pay attention to the room, your vision expands and you can pull yourself out of that acute stress response. So then our next thing is to figure it out. So what are we feeling? Most people, when they're angry, by the way, it's not anger that you're feeling. It's sadness, shame, embarrassment, grief. It is something that comes and all we know how to do is act angry. That's our manifestation of sadness generally, is I'm angry because I don't know how to deal with it. So the idea is to figure it out. What are you feeling? What are you thinking about it? What is it that you actually is it distrust of the person? Is it distrust of the system? What is it that is actually bothering you at this point? And then do you feel like you're going to burden somebody? Is that your thought? Do you have a judgmental thought about the emotion that you're experiencing? So what is it that you're feeling in your body now? Is it that you feel that elephant sitting on your chest? Is it the crying feeling that sits right at your throat until you finally express it? What is it that's going on? So you take the feeling that you've regulated and now you're going to figure it out. You're going to get curious about it. That's the idea. And then what's your current reality? So once you're regulated, you're going to assess the reality of the situation. We go from inside to outside. So what's going on in your life right now? So if whatever you're doing isn't conducive to unpacking all of these feelings, let's say you're about to take over, trade out the position at someone's at work, right? Like literally they're pulling their headset out and you're supposed to plug in and you are all of a sudden, all these big things are coming up. Is that the most conducive moment for you to sit there and be like, what am I feeling right now? How am I feeling it in my body? No, right? I am not saying stand there and let it all hang out right when you're trying to function in your job. The idea is for those of you who don't already do it, talking to yourself is incredibly important. It's actually one of the self-care, a huge piece of self-care is being able to talk to yourself. So the idea is to tell yourself, okay, that's a lot. We're feeling a lot. I cannot handle it right now, but I promise I will deal with this later. Because the idea of chronic compartmentalization is that we just shove it down. We don't deal with it. We're like, yeah, I'll deal with it later. We never do. And our brain knows that we're not going to do it. And so that it just constantly is clocking it all away. So the idea is that you actually tell yourself, this is okay. We're going to deal with this. I promise. And my taking the action is going to be including somebody else. Like let's say I'm sitting down at the position for a very realistic thing. I'm overwhelmed. I need to sit down and start doing my job because guess what? They don't wait for you to settle in before they start talking to you, right? We know this. They're not like, "Oh, ease into the day." They're like, "Are you ready? Here we go." So the idea is send that text to that person you trust that says, "Hey, I feel like I'm overwhelmed right now, or I have something going on. I'm not quite sure what." You don't have to have the answer, by the way. "I'm not quite sure what. Can we talk about it later?" So now you actually have an accountability to addressing it later. And you're promising your brain and your body, "I promise we're going to deal with this. Don't worry." So I know it sound I know it sounds off or odd if you've never done this before, but we talk to ourselves constantly. It's the messages that we're not paying attention to that's part of the problem. We constantly tell ourselves, "Oh, like you're stupid. You can't do this job. You're terrible. Oh, you look like crap today. Oh, you feel like crap today. You're old, you're broken." Those are actually the messages that we tell ourselves all the time. So being deliberate in telling yourself a positive message, yes, it sounds foreign, but it's actually just the opposite of what we normally do. We're just so used to giving ourselves negative messages that we need to just kind of alter our entire thought process behind it. That's all I'm trying to say. And yes, I would say, Chelsea, yes, you do not have to have a traumatic event or depression or chronic stress. Yep. Yep, absolutely. You don't have to have, and by the way, we all respond to trauma and stress completely different. The idea that, let's say we all were on this and we all just witnessed a horrific thing happening on video all together. Would we all experience post-traumatic stress? No, because we all process trauma and stress differently. So it is not just because you could go through your entire career never having a big T trauma call, and yet you can absolutely experience post-traumatic stress injury, post-traumatic stress disorder. You can have chronic anxiety, depression because of the nature of everything cumulatively versus a big T trauma. So this is not only for those of you who have big T traumas and you've compartmentalized. This is for compartmentalizing the everyday, constantly, all the time things that we just pack away. Okay. So the big three for you and your body. They spent millions of dollars figuring out that they took first responders who had experienced big T traumas, people who are going through relational loss, so that's divorce or death, and people who are just trying to be healthy. And they figured out, and these were all separate research projects, and they all came up with the exact same 3 things that were successful in order to actually help heal, process, and recover from these traumas and stress injuries. So mindfulness, meditation, and yoga. These are all things that you could spend an entire session talking about. So I'm going to hit them super briefly because I want to get to the very last part here. But the idea of mindfulness is that you are present in the moment. So it is the space between what you're feeling and your reaction to the stimulus. So whatever stimulated you and your reaction, the mindfulness is the space between. And it's also not worrying about the past or worrying about the future. It's literally, I am in this moment. So that actually puts you back in your body, because if I'm in this moment, I'm experiencing, I'm really angry at my coworker, or I feel really, this is unfair from my supervisor, or I'm really sad about that call I just took. That family will never be the same. Like, that's being in the present. Meditation is not sitting there in the dark, sitting crisscross applesauce, thinking of nothing. Meditation is guided thought, and it is, again, puts you in the present moment and connects you to your body. The idea for these big 3 things are putting you back in your body. We spend so much time as first responders separating ourselves from our body to the point of incredible disconnect so that we actually hurt ourselves. And then yoga is huge too. So that is, again, puts you back in your body. If you have a yoga practice, you know this. You have to focus on where to put different parts of you, how to stretch. Does that hurt? Are you feeling stretched? Like, the idea is that it literally connects you with different parts and different positions by doing yoga. So those 3 things were found to be the absolute best ways to connect you with your body and put you in a mode for healing and a mode for processing, which is why they're so important. So I have one more thing, but I want to end on that. It's a meditation. It's a body scan meditation. So I'm putting my information up there now so that I don't ruin the meditative tone by saying, hey, go to my website. So Help for the Headset has an Instagram. I have a Facebook. Please, by all means, go follow. I put different wellness things up there as well as trainings. Right now, I'm planning on doing for the family training and talking about what it is to be a dispatcher and taking this information and sharing it with our families so they know why we are the way we are. But if you do that QR code, it takes you to my website where it is free resources. So I literally have everything I create, I put on my website for you to download and use, for you, for your agency, however you want to use it. I have a packet for family and friends, literally where it explains the stress response, decision fatigue, compassion fatigue, why we don't want to talk to them when we get home, why we don't want to talk on the phone, why we don't want to make decisions, all of that. So I have a packet for that. I have realistic wellness for dispatchers. So how can we actually be healthy in the job we do? Because we don't get to sleep 8 hours a night, work out 7 times a week, and eat super healthy, right? So I have a realistic packet. I have when the helpers need help. So when somebody's moved beyond stress control response and they are in crisis, I have a whole packet for that. How to listen to your body, what your body's trying to tell you and how to listen to it. I have just a ton of different things. So please go download to your heart's content, use whatever you want to do. But I'm going to end with a body scan meditation, and that'll put us right at our end. But please feel free, send me an email if you have questions, send me a message, however you want. I am not an information or resource hoarder, so I will be happy to share anything that you guys need. So Ricardo's going to play the video for us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick. And he will take us through. Did I do what I needed to do, Ricardo, for that? Yeah, okay.
Begin by making yourself comfortable. Ideally, sit in a chair and allow your back to be straight, but not stiff, with your feet on the ground. If it's comfortable for you, allow your eyes to close and begin bringing your attention into your body, feeling the weight of your body on the chair. Take a few deep breaths, slowly breathing in through the nose and slowly breathing out through your mouth. Bring your attention to your feet. Notice any sensations such as warmth, coolness, pressure, pain, the feeling of your socks or shoes. If you don't feel any sensations, simply register a blank. Move the spotlight of attention up your body to your legs. Notice any sensations here, like the contact with a chair or a breeze. Just see what you notice. Now move the spotlight of attention to your thighs and pelvis and notice any sensations here. Bring your attention to your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, Try to let it soften. Take a deep breath. Continue moving the spotlight of attention and focus on your back and then your shoulders. Noticing how it feels against the chair, any pressure or any other sensations. Try to relax and soften any tight or tense areas you feel. Continue down your arms and into your hands and notice the sensations there, releasing any tension you come across. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft. Relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. Now widen the spotlight of attention to include your whole body. Be aware of your whole body as best as you can, noticing the sensations and any differences from when you started this body scan. Take some deep breaths, and then, when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you joining me and dealing with our little delay in starting, but I hope everybody has a great rest of your sessions. Thank you, Ricardo.
No, thank you. That was excellent, and I'm going to make sure to put the information, the links, and everything over in the community, as well as this video too, because this was an excellent one, and always awesome to have you here and just to hear your message. I mean, I took a lot of notes over here myself in my journal, and excuse me, one of the things that I myself, when I was in dispatch, I started with everything that was going on. I mean, as a lot of people know, everything that I do for a living started from my struggle in dispatch way back in the mid 2000s. Crazy to say, holy shit. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But um I was one of those folks who would bury my calls and bottle everything up. And, a lot of it was because nobody was talking about it. And if you talked about it, you were weak. And I didn't want anyone to ever think, oh, Ricardo can't hack it. And then it started affecting me and impacting me really bad. And I didn't care anymore what people thought and just started sharing and talking and opening up. And it was therapeutic. So thank you for your message and for everything that you do. And man, everybody make sure to follow everything that Shannon is doing and stuff. And again, I'm going to be adding the information and stuff in the community for everybody to be able to connect and learn more from that as well. So thank you. Thank you for being a sponsor of the conference. And I look forward to doing more stuff with you. So thank you.
Yes, very much so. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes,
Bye.
everyone enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next one.